All right, everybody, welcome back to the podcast, and I'm happy to welcome back friend of the pod, David Frum. He's a writer at The Atlantic and the host of the David Frum Show. David, great to see you.
Thank you so much, Matt. And I have to begin by thanking my friends at the Picton Gazette, the oldest continuously published newspaper in Canada, for the hospitality, because we had a bit of a technology fail in the pre-show, and it's then the Picton Gazette came to the rescue, so I thank them.
Thank you, Picton Gazette, and thank you, David, for making time. And I know it's hard when you're traveling and the Wi-Fi isn't great, but thank you for accommodating us. And I want to jump around. A lot of crazy stuff happening. Let's start with this Jeffrey Epstein story, right? So obviously, everyone from Pam Bondi to Kash Patel to Dan Bongino were like, "Hey, this smells really bad. Like, give us the client list. Like, there's no way this guy committed suicide." And now they're saying, "Hey, all of you conspiracy theorists, get in line. There's nothing to see here." What do you make of this?
Well, look, I am a deep non-conspiracy theorist. I'm a student of history. And one of the things you realize is that history is full of coincidences and screw-ups. And when people try to do conspiracies, they usually don't work. And the things that look like conspiracies are just like a series of moronic pieces of good luck for the bad people coming together. So I've never believed any of the Epstein stuff beyond the obvious level, which is he was a bad person doing bad things who drew a lot of people into his orbit, some of them there nefariously, many of them just there because they were attracted by, the trappings of wealth. That, I think you're this rich man, you're giving away money, and no one knows where your wealth comes from. Many people want a piece of it, and so they come down to your place to see you and pay court. All of that said, boy, does it look bad. And the people in charge are doing everything they're possible in their power to galvanize. And I think there is something grimly, brutally ironic that one of the reasons the Epstein story, let me speak very candidly about this. So the QAnon conspiracy theory wants to downplay every form of bad behavior in American life, from school shootings to high-level white-collar crime. All of it, they want to concentrate all of the human capacity for moral indignation on one form of human evil alone, and that is the abuse of children. But they also want to believe that the abuse of children is not, as we know it is, mostly done by people in the household. The most child abuse is done by someone tragically present in the same household as the child, and it's not connected to anything other than lack of protection and human brutality. They want to create instead a kind of complex, and so they can elaborate this this scheme, and they seized on the Epstein as the example of, not the example, but the sort of center of all child abuse in the world for two reasons. First, because Bill Clinton had a relationship with Epstein of some kind, and so you can make a partisan point. And second, because Epstein had a Jewish name. And so there's a big sub-theme in QAnon, which is that child abuse is actually a Jewish conspiracy against children. And they have other ways of sort of putting, but so Epstein was perfect. The only problem has always also been that Epstein was also close to Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is supposed to be the, hero, the St. George of this Christian play against Jewish child abuse. So what do you do about that? And then the people around Trump's always trying to signal, let's everyone go easy on the Epstein, but the people around him, like Bongino, have made this like this central theme, and now they're all caught in trying to assure people that there is nothing here, but they keep acting as if there's something here. There probably is nothing here, but
but you've got that video. The video of Pam Bondi on Fox News with John Roberts saying the Epstein client list is on my desk. And then you've got people like Tucker Carlson, who seem skeptical. He doesn't think Trump's on it, but he thinks that they're protecting some powerful people.
Well,
and then Elon Musk, who owns X, Twitter, is still pushing this story, even though he deleted that one tweet where he said Trump was on the list. So I'm not sure this is going to go away.
No, for Carlson and Musk, the Epstein is look what they. I don't want to attribute thoughts to them, but the name is very. If Epstein were Epworth, I don't think Tucker Carlson and Musk would be as interested in the story as they were, even with the Bill Clinton connection. If if it were, Justin Epworth was at the center of this uh, this network of rich men, some of who are engaged in the abusing of underage girls, I don't think it would be as interesting to them. But it's Epstein, and he was connected to, had some connections to Israeli politicians. That's just perfect. That's just pure internet joy for those guys.
Speaking of Musk, he's starting a third party, the America Party, at least
Yeah,
allegedly. It seems like he's going to start it. And there is some thought that, look, you don't have to win the presidency with a third
yeah,
party, but if you could elect 5 congressmen, a couple of senators, and get them to sort of caucus together and vote as a bloc,
yeah.
you could dramatically change American politics with these slim margins we currently have. But the problem, I think, is Elon Musk is going to run it in
Yeah.
character's destiny. But what do you make of this?
Yeah.
Is he blowing smoke, or is there something here?
Um, both. So, although America is normally at any given time a two-party system, it has a rich history of powerful third parties. Free soilers in the 19th century, free silver people in the late 19th century, socialist parties, temperance, prohibition parties. But the key to a successful third party is this: there is an issue. The big two parties, for their own reasons, do not want to touch the issue. But the issue is important, and it galvanizes support. And so you have a unifying principle. You can bring a lot of people who have nothing in common otherwise, but who are free soilers or prohibitionists or socialists, and there is this piece of political space that is available that the two big parties don't want. It's untenanted. You can seize it, and you can build it, and you can then drive one of the two parties into your direction. That's what happened with the free silver or the greenback parties of the late 19th century. Is both the Republicans and the Democrats did not want to go near monetary policy for various reasons, from the 1870s through the 1880s, until finally the Democrats pick William Jennings Bryan and annex the loose money people. And that's it. That's the end of that third party, because one of the parties said, okay, this looks promising to us. You could say Franklin Delano Roosevelt and the New Deal did the same thing to the socialist parties. They were so powerful in the 1910s and even into the 1920s. So what is the single issue that is there for Elon Musk? Actually, because Musk has this problem, he has this completely idiosyncratic politics, to put it mildly, of authoritarian libertarianism with a lot of conspiracism and a lot of ego. And now you could form in a European country. They do have these things where there'll be a charismatic politician who will make a list that is purely about that person. And you're a Silvio, you belong to the Silvio Berlusconi movement, and whatever Silvio is doing that week is what the party stands for. But those don't tend to do so well in the United States. You need an issue, and he hasn't got it. Otherwise, if you just say, as Andrew Yang said before, it would be good to have a third party, that you attract everyone who's in some way dissatisfied with the two big parties, even if they have nothing in common. And there's no issue to glue them together. There's just a lot of disaffected people. And you can also attract a lot of weirdos. And that's the fate of the Ross Perot built a personal movement that degenerated into a weirdo movement once Ross Perot was no longer there.
And I guess debt and deficit are not big enough right now. I mean, they're big issues, important issue. It's an important issue, but
debt and deficit are not a single issue, because you can deal with debt and deficit by raising revenue, which some people want to do, and you can deal with it by reducing spending, which other people want to do. You could also deal with it, as Trump wants to do, by manipulating the currency and manipulating interest rates. So, and those are actually not a single issue. The debt and the deficit is an expression of America's inability to make other kinds of decisions. Now, sometimes you have, here's how it could work, but then sometimes you have an issue like municipal corruption in the 19th century. It's not really an issue. It's more an issue of the failure of other institutions. And then a lot of institutional-minded people get together to make the institutions more pure, to say, you know what, we'll have city managers instead of elected city councils. We'll move party politics out of the municipal area. But those people tend to be very fancy, highly educated, and they then tend to work not through mass movements, but through elite maneuverings. And that's, again, not Elon Musk. So I don't think that deficit, it's an expression of our failure to make decisions. It's not that animating force of we have to ban slavery from the new territories, we have to stop people drinking, we have to print more money or make silver money, we have to have the socialist commonwealth. Those are true single issues.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on this, right? So like Elon Musk, part of what makes me think it could have a chance, he's got a ton of money. I mean, he's the richest guy in the world, they say. So money's not going to be a problem. And then it seems like, the ground is ripe for this, right? The Republican Party, the Democratic Party clearly are not. There are a lot of us who are disaffected right now, but Elon's just an imperfect messenger for an anti-corruption,
Yeah.
good government cause, and I don't know what the cause would be otherwise.
He missed his moment too. If Elon Musk had done this in 2016, so that was in 2016, Elon Musk was someone who appealed to right-coded people because he was this unbelievable entrepreneur with this astonishing record of creation, and he appealed to left-coded people because his entrepreneurial success was in the areas of environmental improvement. And he could have then built, and he was not a well-known person as an individual, and so he could have used his wealth, used his left coding and right coding to build one of those personalist movements. And it could have been the Elon Musk party and everyone who loves Elon. And look, that's what Charles de Gaulle's movement was all about. He had left people and right people who liked different aspects of his personality, and they're all loyal to de Gaulle. He could have tried that. But at this point, Musk is strongly coded. He's unacceptable to left people because of all the things he said and done. He's unacceptable to right people because he's at variance with Donald Trump and because his lifestyle is so dissolute. And so actually he is repellent to both the major factions, and he doesn't have a single issue. He just has his own personality and his idiosyncratic. There are not a lot of people say what we need to do is reduce the deficit, keep women at home so they have more babies, expose the Jewish child molester ring, and go to Mars. That's
the Venn diagram.
Those are my issues.
I like that. All right. Well, since you're talking about the environment with the electric cars and all that, let me segue to these horrific, Texas flash floods that have killed a lot of people, including this, a lot of girls at this Christian, I think it's called Camp Mystic, this Christian camp in the hill country of Texas. I think there's like 160 people missing. And there have been a lot of questions like, is this just cyclical, something that just happens every 80 years or something? Is this a sign of climate change? Is this the result of Donald Trump's cutting of the National Weather Service, that the alerts were not going out or heated? What do you make of that?
I don't make my wife Danielle and I have very different reactions to these kinds of human tragedies. As as you know, we've had a loss in our family, and Danielle's responded to it she reads every story of human suffering, looking for community. I respond to it by I can't read any stories of human suffering because they make me too upset. And I have not gone deeply enough into the story to know about the technical. So I just keep thinking about what it would be to be one of those parents of those two cabins, the youngest two cabins, the most helpless girls. The heroic person who gave his life trying to save them, but unsuccessfully. I don't have a view on it because I just can't bring my eyeballs near enough to the TV set for long enough to have a distinct impression of what happened. I see and imagine the loss of those parents. I can't deal with it, and so I don't have views about who's to blame here. I hope that we can have responsible investigation, if it, and whether it's driven by long-term climatic changes or freak events, the government can't protect us from everything, but there's certain things that we look to the government to do, and you want to know, is the government doing everything it can, both state and federal? And this is a lot of these incidents are, sometimes there's blame, sometimes they're just lessons to be learned to how to prevent similar tragedies. But again, I just can't bring my eyeballs close enough to the story to have an intelligent view about it.
Totally understand. All right, we'll move to another difficult story, but one that I know you've been following, and that has to do with the war in Ukraine. Trump finally lashing out at Putin. And then we had this weird thing where weapons deliveries to Ukraine were halted, and
Yeah.
then apparently Trump didn't know about it, and now they've been resumed.
Yeah.
Tell us what is going on.
Okay. Well, first, if it is true, and it may be true, that that weapons are stopped, and Trump didn't know, and Hegseth didn't order it, and then that implies that Elbridge Colby, who's like a tertiary level employee in the Department of Defense, but who's a vocal foe of Ukraine, he, at his own initiative, stopped aid to. He's like the Colonel Ollie North in this situation. That man, if any of this is true, if Trump's story about what happened is true, Colby should be fired. The idea that you would violate the policy of the declared policy of the president and the Secretary of Defense at your own initiative, if any of this is true, if the story is true, fire him, out.
This is a reverse Ollie North, because Ollie North was,
doing what the president wanted. You're right. Yes, exactly.
And doing, advocating a policy that you could disagree with it, but I just think from a geopolitical standpoint, it's the opposite, right? So, Ollie North was trying to basically give funds to the Contras and
save the Contras. He was trying to save the Contras,
as opposed to not saving the Ukrainians.
So I've stressed the phrase "if this is true" a lot of times because I have big doubts that the story is true. And we know Donald Trump is not a friend to the Ukrainians, and we know that these recent noises where he's been saying they have to be able to defend themselves. But Ukraine, but what he's been doing is he's been removing Ukraine's capacity to defend itself, not to leave Ukraine defenseless exactly as an end in itself, although I'm sure there are people in his administration who would like to leave Ukraine defenseless. But what he wants to do is turn off the Ukrainian strikes inside Russia. And so my reading of what he's saying, and sometimes you can decode Trump's words in ways that make sense. He's saying, I will give you back the purely defensive systems, the Patriot missiles, the other things that knock missiles out of the air, protect your cities, if and only if you cease striking back inside Russia. In other words, I will make you less defenseless if you agree to stop trying to win the war. That, I think, is what is going on. And I think that is Trump's policy. And it may be that people at the Department of Defense overinterpreted Trump's policy, possibly, if it's true. And if it's true, then they should be fired. But I think more likely they correctly interpreted Trump's policy. They just overdid it a little bit, which is making Ukrainian cities more vulnerable so as to stop Ukraine from striking back.
And what do you make of, Trump being critical of Putin, more critical than he previously has been?
Yeah.
Is that just rhetoric? Is he actually?
I don't have a reading on that. I think there have been various points in the past where he will say things like, I don't love this, or, but he has tilted so far in this direction. And he is so determined that Ukraine not win. Now, it has to be said, as we said this, Biden, in his own way, was also unwilling to let Ukraine win. That in the moment to save Ukraine was the summer of 2023. The war starts, of course, in February of 2022, and there was time in the summer of 2023 to get Ukraine the weapons it needed, everything. And Biden always went slow on tanks, slow on jets, slow on permission to strike inside Russian territories, and always citing fear of nuclear war as the reason, but in a way that suggested this was more the policy came first and the explanation came second, not the other way around.
Yeah, look, I think Biden and the Biden administration in many ways were, I use the term conservative, lowercase c conservative, cautious, pragmatic. Whether it's prosecuting Trump, which they could have done a lot quicker and possibly, eliminated his chance of becoming president again, or whether it's funding Ukraine. I wonder if they had known we've got 4 years, let's do this hurry up offense. They were like playing as
Yeah.
if they had all the time in
The
the
time in the
world.
world. I think it's
Yeah.
something else that was going on, and your way of describing it as charitable. Let me give you a slightly less charitable explanation. I think they're also very intellectually arrogant. That the people around Biden believe that they could calibrate precisely the exact amount of force necessary to repel Russia without escalating the war beyond what they wanted. They could find that spot, spot number 58 on the dial of 99 options. You dial it exactly there, not more, not less. And you get the result you want, and not more, not less. I think they tried to do that with Israel, and that give them enough that they could prevail against, but not so much that it would go farther than they wanted. And I remember I was invited to one of those background briefings where some of the Biden people explained this way of thinking, and I remember saying to one of them, and I won't violate confidences by saying who the conversation was with. I said, "Do you ever think you'd have better results if you were less smart?" Um,
It's worked
like,
for Trump.
yeah, just like take the big club and hit the snake until it stops moving.
Hmm.
And if you overdo it, maybe you've overdone it and you've wasted some energy. But I think they were very keen on applying exactly the right amount of force to achieve the end without undue escalation, and they exaggerated their ability to estimate where that point was.
Yeah, I wrote a book called Too Dumb to Fail, and I always thought the sequel should be Too Smart to Win, because sometimes I
Yeah,
think that does happen. But I would push back slightly, David. You know, I think it is appropriate when you're dealing with Russia,
yeah,
this nuclear power that is obviously hostile, to think like, okay, we want to support Ukraine, but we also don't want Putin to go nuclear, to for this to escalate and for us to be drawn in. And so, what is the limiting principle there? Like, is it no American boots on the ground? Like, what is the line that you would draw to prevent getting sucked into something that you actually don't want to be sucked into?
um, you would notice if Putin were going to go nuclear if he didn't win, he would have gone nuclear a week into February of 22, when it became clear he wasn't going to win. And uh, you also need to accept you can't really predict his actions. You can deter him, you can threaten him, you can bring pressure on via China and India, with whom he needs to keep relations, that this will be a conclusive thing. But you also need to stop this. One of the things that happens in the American foreign policy apparatus includes so many smart people who are in charge of thinking so many contingencies with so much time to plan. So they have developed theories of things Putin might do as nuclear retaliations, which are, I'm sure that the United States Department of Defense has more scenarios that Putin might do than Putin has in his mafia head. And so they would talk about things. What if he did an upper atmosphere? They detonated in the air to show. I don't think that's the way Putin does business, but it's the kind of thing that if you're a defense intellectual going, writing, detailing every rung in the ladder of escalation, you think through these things. But in the end, this is where just you can talk yourself out of anything. But if you're going to help Ukraine, you have to help Ukraine, and that means, right. and that means accepting the risks. And if you can't accept the risks, then goodbye Portugal.
Before we move off from this, I would also say, like, as someone who's kind of a Reagan conservative, speaking for myself, I wouldn't expect a Democrat to do what they ought to do. Like, in other words, to me, like, the fact that you had a Democrat in office who actually was supporting Ukraine in this way, I feel like it's icing on the cake. It's like, I didn't get my guy's not there. That would be the best scenario, would be like Reagan reanimates. But with Joe Biden, I'll take what I can get. And so I'm pretty happy that he stood up to Putin to the degree he did.
But the politics moved. And I think, look, Biden never believed that. Look, the best thing about Biden was he was a man from a different time who remembered when the American political system worked more cohesively, and who thought of the Trump years as an unfortunate but temporary aberration. And the best policy was to get past them as quickly as possible, and not make martyrs and victims. The thing I just described is also the worst thing about it, because it turns out, and we all wish he was right, but he was wrong. That it was not a temporary aberration, and you weren't going to get past it. And the Republicans were not going to nominate Nikki Haley in 2024. They were going to nominate Trump, and the return of Trump meant trouble for Ukraine. And many people in the Trump orbit want outright defeat of Ukraine. So here we are, and they needed, certainly by the summer of 23, you needed to take the Trump possibility very seriously and to realize there's very little time. I don't think Biden ever took seriously that he might be forced out of office or that he might lose the re-election. He just always assumed, he would have time in
I
20.
know.
If he made any mistakes in 23, he could tidy them up in 2025.
Well, speaking of things, Trump changing everything, and we weren't going to go back to Nikki Haley, I'm starting to wonder if he may have changed everything in both parties, right? We saw the rise of this Zoran Mamdani winning is a Democratic socialist who won that Democratic mayoral primary in New York. I don't think he's going to be the Democratic nominee in 2028, but I do wonder if he may be a harbinger of things to come. If Democrats look and say, look, we tried to do it your way, Matt. We ran Kamala Harris. I know she's not perfect, but she's sort of a normie, establishment, institutionalist. And we lost. We lost against Trump. Trump has won twice. If you can't beat him, join him. And so if that happens, we'll have two political parties that are kind of extreme fringe and yet exciting. What do you think?
And yet anti-market.
And anti-Israel, and you have one anti-Ukraine party and one anti-Israel party.
Yes. No. I think someone has a diagram of this, which of like the flags of the Ukraine, Russia, and that the extremes of the debate, are anti-Israel and anti-Ukraine, and then the right tilts pro-Israel, anti-Ukraine, and the left. Okay.
Yep.
And it's hard. And for some reason, in these, years ago, we had a Labrador retriever that was dearly beloved in our family. We thought he was very good looking, and the breeder wanted him to enter a dog show, and we were honored. And when she returned the dog to us, we said, "How did Cobber do?" And she said, "He came second." And that's great. How many dogs were in the dog show? 2. And so come on, second in a 2-dog. This is Israel Ukraine is a 2-item IQ test. It should be easy to nail it. It should be easy to score 2 out of 2. Should not be so hard, and yet people find it difficult to score 2 out of 2. But here's the thing. So Zoran Mamdani says, "I want government to run free, cheap grocery stores, which will be cheaper because they won't pay taxes and they won't pay rent." And indeed, if you went to any grocery store and said you don't have to pay taxes and you don't have to pay rent, they could lower their prices too. And I said, okay, that's a really stupid idea. But is it as stupid as the United States government effectively taking over U.S. Steel and saying that the only way we will allow the acquisition of U.S. Steel by the company that is willing to put capital into it to keep it alive, which is from our friend Japan, our good friend Japan, is if the president has a personal golden share that allows him to say, not only can you not alter the working arrangements, you can't even move headquarters out of Pittsburgh without the president's personal permission. Like, I don't know. There's a lot to choose from between that economic philosophy and the economic philosophy of the government operating no rent, no tax, government-owned, unionized grocery stores, thinking that will be cheaper than Whole Foods. Both of them are economic. I mean, the entry points to, and again, you don't have to go all the way to ultra libertarianism. The government that should charge people to use the highways, to say the government shouldn't be operating grocery stores, and the government shouldn't be telling U.S. Steel where to locate its corporate headquarters.
Indeed. And I think Trump has created this permission structure. It's like, well, he's sort of, there were things that were taboo that he has normalized. And once you normalize them, then they're normalized, right? And so why should I be outraged about government seizing control of the means of production or whatever?
No, the Mamdani thing is worrisome in that, look, one of the big weaknesses of the Democratic Party over the past 15 years has been it's the party of public provision, but it is not serious about making public provision effective. So it says we want to spend all this money on trains, but we don't care whether there's any train service on the train line. And this is the point that Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson, my former Atlantic colleague, have made so many good points about. Just as you and I are recording, there's an article today in the Free Press about how American librarians are not committed to keeping libraries safe space for young people and children, and they oppose any effort. You get some mumbling, dangerous looking, foul smelling person in your library, and they don't want the police to roust them. And so the result is library attendance is down. If you won't operate the library properly, you shouldn't be surprised that people don't go there. If you're going to be the party of public provision, you have to be the party of high public standards. And so it's important that when blue cities volunteer for failure, really, what do you think a government grocery store is in 3 minutes going to become not only a joke that discredits the idea of government provided funded grocery stores, it's going to discredit the idea of government doing anything. Because it's so obviously a thing that the government shouldn't do and will fail at, and we don't have to go into all the if you don't get why it's going to fail,
then just go to the DMV.
no, but the DMV is something that government should do, and by the way, the DMV does work. The last time I was in a physical DMV, which is a long time ago, because you can do this all now online. I remember this was probably 10 years ago. I'd lost my driver's license. I had to get a new copy. I didn't have to renew it, just to visit a new physical copy. And I went to the DMV, and I hadn't been there for a while. Brace for the worst. And I give my name at the entrance. I've made my appointment online. I give my name. I explain, yes, I'm the person who asked for this. And then they say, okay, take a number and go sit there. Go sit down. I go sit down, I open my laptop, and I try to pick up an internet signal. And it's a little difficult in the basement space where this thing is located. It takes me 4 or 5 minutes to get online. I get online, I'm about to download some emails. Mr. Frum, yes, your driver's license is ready. I got the driver's license faster than I got the signal. And I think, maybe some of these DMV jokes may be a little out of date. But anyway.
No, you're right. And in fairness, my last trip to the DMV was actually easy too. Maybe it's gotten better. I don't know.
I think what has happened is governments are huge purchasers of information technology, and things that can be done with information technology are think in 1960, the year I was born, how many people did it take to process a Social Security check? The file clerks and people to oversee the check writing process and the insertion of the checks into the envelopes and the envelopes into the mail, and then every Social Security check had to be manually delivered by a letter carrier to an address. That's all gone, and so those processes have been streamlined. And the fact that the government and people in government then have to upskill and constantly provide new kinds of more fancy services, but there are things that government can do. They have to do them well. And the number one thing government has to do is preserve public order, to make sure that parents with children feel safe and welcome in a library. And when you get on the bus, that the bus is not full of addicts, which is if you don't charge people to use the bus, what do the buses turn into? They turn into homeless shelters. And that's not to say, by the way, that we write off the homeless people, because we have to care for them too. But we have to be honest about why they are homeless and their addiction and mental health issues, and they're just not slightly different people. They're people whom many will perceive as threatening for reasons that are certainly rational and maybe very realistic.
Totally. Yeah, no, we have to be compassionate, and we need to treat addiction and all of that. But if you've got a situation where, New York would become, if Mamdani had his way, I think New York would become what it was in the 70s pretty quickly, right?
Yeah. There's a famous story about Fiorello LaGuardia, who would go on these prompt inspection tours, and he would visit government offices of various kinds. And I remember a story. One of his stories was he would visit a government office, and he found somebody in the sort of lounging in a chair, asleep, with a newspaper over his face and the hat over his head, just like in the old movies. And the mayor came in, and everyone came to attention, but the guy was sort of startled, and so he didn't pull himself fully to attention. He's still wearing his hat, and Fiorello LaGuardia knocked his hat off and said, "Take your hat off when you talk to a citizen." And that drive of, we have to provide services to people, but we have to provide public order, and policing is the first thing that a city government has to do. That's job one, is policing. And if you are hostile to job one, what is all the rest of all your civic commitment to do? So this is not about Mamdani, who's, you know what? Someday he will be doing the one-man theatrical production of the life of it, and he'll be happy, and his audience will be happy. He's obviously a great performer. But the kind of zealous attention to detail, the meticulous standard, the entering into the life of a city, when blue cities don't do that, they create a very strong what about for when President Trump and people like him just try to steal. Well, people would rather tolerate, I think, a little stealing than a lot of disorder.
Big time. All right, we could talk, but I'm going to start wrapping it up. I'm going to move to the more fun, portion. I've noticed you've been doing pull-ups. I've seen this on social media. You're in good shape. People don't doing a pull-up is not easy. Like most adult men, I would venture to say, cannot lift the weight of their bodies. But what's the reason? I forget. There was some reason. What's up with this?
Oh, well, I've been an exercise fanatic for a long time, and but I just turned 65, and so I marked my 65th birthday by doing a pull-up series. And the thing about pull-ups is I work with a trainer who's a woman and very fit, but not an enormous person. And she's this relentless driver. But one of her ideas is, if you say do 10 pull-ups, people imagine you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and you're done. What she encourages you to think of them as ladders. So you do 2 and take a 10-second break. Now do 4 and take a 10-second break. Now take another 10-second break and do 6 and then you go down. Then after the 6 you do 4 and then you do 2. Now you do it 3, 5, 8, 10, and then you set a timer for 35 minutes. And you would be once you've gotten the rhythm of this, and once you've overcome a lot of the phobias, because a lot of the reason people can't do it is not because they're not strong enough, but the project seems so daunting that they don't believe they can. And like any muscle movement, you just have to learn how to do it. There are a lot of things that, kick a soccer ball back and forth between your 2 feet. The first time you do it, it's impossible, but the 10th or 12th time, you may not be that much more. Your brain, you've trained your brain, so you can train your brain to do these things. And so I gave myself 35 minutes, and I was going to do not 65 in a row, but these ladders of 2, 4, 6, 8, 6, 4, 2, and so on. And I hit 65, and I was still going. And so I said, okay, let's do one more. And so we got to 100, and but that again, that's not just rattling them off one after another. That is with these ladders with 10 seconds within the ladder and then a minute between the ladders.
So are pull-ups are hands this way, chin-ups are this way? Is that how it works? Okay.
Yes.
And you're doing pull-ups.
There's a more technical term. Chin-ups are harder because they use the biceps, which is a weaker muscle than the triceps, which are used to do a pull-up with the hands facing forward.
Yeah, I feel like I'm better this way. But it's just different muscles.
Well, it depends. It depends on how you've trained the muscles, but your triceps are always potentially stronger than your biceps.
Now, do you literally have to get your chin above the bar to count it? Okay.
Yeah, we don't do and no momentum here. Like there's not the Marjorie Taylor Greene kicking off the wall. No, you have to come to it.
I remember that.
That's total cheating. Now you have to pull your bar to your chin to the bar, and then you have to come to a complete stop when you're at the bottom.
So I mentioned at the top of the show that you have a show, the David Frum Show. You're now a podcaster and a YouTuber and all that. What have you learned from that?
I've learned your job is harder than it looks, and I don't even get enough appreciation for that. So as you demonstrate, you have to plan for the portion of the program that is a conversation. You have to plan, and then I open the show with a monologue, and that's really hard because if you want to read my writing, it's there in the Atlantic. So I didn't see a lot of value in writing something that was simpler and then putting it on a teleprompter and reading it. That I thought that if I'm going to do this, people want direct human-to-human communication with all its admitted imperfections and stammers, and it may not be as economically stated as it would be in a piece of writing, but it's more personal. And so I speak for 8 to 15 minutes with a few notes, but no script. And that I find that really, really hard. And I sometimes flub it and need to do 2 or 3 takes. And then with the dialogues, you have to plan them. And you have to, I think, what part of the planning, and one of the ways that I think podcasts exceed cable news is cable news has a very narrow definition of what is news. And they pursue that. So my very first conversation was with Rahm Emanuel, who was contemplating running for president. Now, if I were hosting Meet the Press, I would have to spend the whole interview asking him about his plans to run for president. But when he's on my podcast, I know if he's going to announce this, the place he's not going to do it is on my podcast. So there's no sense hectoring about him and wasting time trying to get him to give an answer that if he does it, he has a plan about how he will do it, and this is not the plan. And he's done all the things he's done. He's not going to slip. He's not going to make a mistake and inadvertently reveal something. So don't ask the question that you're not going to get a useful answer to. But think about what can you get him to say, especially since you have a little more time. And a lot of the time I try to get people to be human. So the second last show I did was with Bridget Brink, who was an ambassador to Ukraine, appointed by President Biden, served President Trump. And we talked a little bit about why she then resigned in protest. We talked a little bit about that. But what I wanted to get her to answer was I think people have an idea of the ambassador eating, going to fancy meals and eating off china under silver chandeliers, crystal chandeliers. When in fact, the ambassador to Ukraine is there in a war zone, living in an underground bunker, so I want to give some texture of what that experience was like. And so sometimes I'm more successful than other times, but it's developing. That we just posted most recently a conversation with George Conway, where we talked a lot about, George, I've known him off and on for a long time. He was president of the Yale Law School chapter of the Federalist Society the same year that I was president of the Harvard chapter. And we weren't friends in those days. We didn't know each other, but we knew each other by reputation. And we talked about our different journeys. Why could you go from there to where we are now? And why do we feel like we've walked a consistent path, even if it's brought us to a destination we never expected?
That sounds like a good listen. I will be listening. I love podcasts in general, but if you haven't already subscribed to the David Frum Show, now's your time. Like, rate, review, all that good stuff. David Frum.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure. Thank you for coming back on the podcast.
And thanks to the Picton Gazette for making it possible.